Earthlings, welcome along to another special. Andy, we've done about 4 specials and we're neglecting our regular shows, I think, at the moment. But
that's all right. As long as people aren't getting sick of sight of us.
They probably are, yeah. This is our special panel, and we're going to talk about something that feminist, vegan, human rights activist Angela Davis said, and it was used in a corporate welfare video, and I think Clif alerted me to it, and so we're going to go from there. Now, you'll all know myself and Andy and Ronnie, so maybe Clif and then David, you could introduce yourself, just a couple of minutes each.
Okay, well, I'm David Arenas from Colombia. I've been vegan for about 12 years, give or take. And I have done some stuff, some activist stuff on the streets, and also on social media. My account is the same as my name. So on Instagram, I have some writings and some stuff on Facebook as well.
You do indeed. I think you're most active on Instagram. Would you say that, David? Or
Yeah.
is that wrong? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. And lately on TikTok.
Oh, okay. Very good. So, Clif.
Hey, so my name's Clif, obviously. Been vegan about 11 years now. Went active straight afterwards. I've been involved in the past with AV, the Save movement. I set up my own group here, which is no longer going, unfortunately. So mostly I spend my time doing outreach on the streets now. I have a YouTube channel. I do school talks. Just anything really that I feel that I can make a difference for the animals in some way. So yeah, most active probably now on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, quite a few people seem to be sharing those around now. Okay, well, that's everybody. I'm sure everybody knows it. Oh, this Ronnie Lee character, who the hell are you? But
don't ask me.
Don't ask you. Right, people. So welcome along to our first panel. What do you think of that one, Andy?
I was going to say, getting quite good at these titles now. A bit more
good,
groovy and retro every time.
I think we'll have to keep
Like
it
a
like that, won't we?
game show from the 70s.
Yeah, that's what we imagine me. Oh, yeah.
Well, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a DJ. So
it's a risky business, Roger. They're all in jail, aren't they? The DJs.
Oh, I know. Yeah, DJs. I know. Yeah.
At least you're in jail for something, commendable.
Yeah. I never thought of it that way, Ronnie. But thanks for reminding me about that. Okay, so we're here to talk about something that Angela Davis said, and essentially the first sentence was the thing that I think triggered a lot of people and got a response. And so the first sentence is this: you don't have to be a vegan to oppose the systematic abuse of other animals. I don't think she says the other. So I've actually got the clip. So I guess the first thing to do probably is just play that and go from there, I think, everyone. So let me just rearrange this and we'll go.
Be a vegan, to be opposed to the systematic abuse of animals, which I think is very much related to the abuse of human animals. Industrialization of food production has led to a situation in which none of those involved actually reflect on what this process looks like from the vantage point of the animals who are raised and then killed.
Right, and that's where we get a corporate logo popping up. First question or first issue that I thought I'd raise is, does anybody know the circumstances of this video? In other words, I mean, we might as well name and shame. It's Mercy for Animals, the welfare corporation. This year they've had $12.5 million to spend on their animal welfare campaigns. Now, it's interesting. Do you think that they just took something that was already there, or do you think she was interviewed by them? Because I couldn't really work out that bit of it. Any ideas, anyone?
I think she was interviewed by Frank Barat. That's what I found on YouTube.
And that was Mercy for Animals guy, is it?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay. So it could still be just clips then that were already out there on some form, you know?
And maybe I have a suspicion it was for Mercy for Animals, because she has said in the past that she doesn't speak openly about veganism a lot. So perhaps that's why that was done. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, could be. It's interesting because I saw a clip where she was saying that she doesn't say much about veganism, and then another clip where she said that she started to mention it more often than she normally did. So obviously, the issue for us to start with, I think, is do we think that this first sentence is accurate?
No.
No, me neither.
Ronnie?
Well, I think it all depends on what's meant by systematic abuse. It's really interesting because probably about an hour ago I was talking to my wife Louise, who's been a vegan for 34 years, I think. She asked me what the show was about, and I said it was because Angela Davis had said this, and Louise immediately said, yes, you do. Yes, you do have to be a vegan. And that was her immediate reaction to it. And I think that's probably has been the immediate reaction of a lot of vegans. And I think this is why we're obviously doing this show. I think
it is indeed. Okay, before we go on to Andy and myself then, Clif, do you want to expand on what you said? Why has she chosen not to talk about veganism much? Do you know?
I'm not too sure. I really don't know. I know she's a human rights activist, so I presume that takes most of her thought process, and that's what she does mostly. She didn't clarify exactly why. It might be an uncomfortable subject for her to breach. I think when you're talking to other human beings about human oppression, it's much easier for some people just to focus on those things, and she may feel like when she's talking about other animals to people that she's perhaps pushing people away. Like they're outside the I feel like we as vegans are inside this little bubble, and then there's people outside the bubble, and we're trying to invite them. For me, I'm trying to invite people into the circle of compassion. But when you're talking about other animals, that's a difficult wall for people to breach. So that may be why she feels like if she talks about other animals, then that's going to push people away from the human rights stuff.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, going back to the question, I think she couldn't say you don't have to be vegan to oppose the systematic use of other animals. But I think this is technically correct. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I would agree with that. The word abuse is what kind of is why. I mean, let me make my position clear. Do I think that you should be a vegan if that's your view? Yeah, absolutely. And if you hold it and you're not, then you're a hypocrite. There's no argument there. However, from looking at it from the outside, that could be on the slogan for, say, an RSPCA flyer, and nobody would bat an eyelid of it because of how it's worded. So as a sentence, most people are against the systematic abuse of animals and yet still contribute to it every single day because they don't necessarily put those things together. So yeah. That would be how I would look at it. As a sentence, no, actually, and that's a big part of the problem. But in terms of hypocrisy, you have to be vegan, but that doesn't mean that people won't read that as it is and agree with it. If we were to walk down the street, say, with their clipboard and ask random members of the public, are you against the systematic abuse of animals? Who's going to say no? Really? If that's the sentence that they're given.
That's why I advocate that way, Andy, if I could just interject. So most of my signs will use words like abuse, because people, I have a sign that I use a lot, and it attracts a lot of people because they want to come and tell me. And the question says, what are your views on animal abuse? And everybody wants to come and tell me that they are against animal abuse. So then I ask them a series of 3 or 4 questions. So the questions go in a logical format, and it's basically, I am basically telling them that if you think kicking a dog is bad, well then why is it not abuse to enslave somebody? Why is it not abuse to forcibly impregnate somebody, to take their children away? Those things are abuse. So that's the conversation I want to have with people. I want to reset the narrative on what abuse actually is, because most people, I agree with you, most people in their head think they're against animal abuse. They think they're against animal abuse, but they're not. They're not. And if they're supporting the use of animals and at base level, using animals for me is almost always exclusively abuse. Like, if I could ask you all a question, do you think that slavery is abuse? Would you all agree that it is? Well then,
yes.
Oh.
I booted him. No, I didn't.
But yeah, I mean, just to fill the gap quickly. It's kind of the same with cruelty, isn't it? It's the same with cruelty. If you ask people, the vast majority, unless they're sadistic or there's an issue there and they're trying to be antagonistic on purpose, they're going to say that they're against cruelty. But the problem is their idea of cruelty isn't use; it's the excess of the things that they have to do to get from point A to point B. So if they want to eat chickens, they know that they have to die. They can forget about all the parts in between, right, and pretend that there's no cruelty that goes on then. But they have to accept that use happens. So they don't see that as cruelty. What they're looking for protection from is excess. So that's how the RSPCA and stuff can word this. There's some element of cruelty that everyone accepts, or the public accept. And it's when it goes above and beyond that people have got a problem. However, if you ask them, are you against animal cruelty? The answer would be yes. But their definition of cruelty is very different to ours. They don't include use. That cruelty has to be excessive. It has to be to the point where this isn't good enough. It's not just the fact that it happens. They don't see that.
But I would say that's precisely the problem. The double standard between what we call abuse, if the victim is a human, for example. If the
I totally agree with it. It's just we've got to think about this from the general public's definition as opposed to how we view these words.
But we are the ones trying to normalize the use of these words in the right context. We are the ones trying to make it even for animals.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's take this example, for example. So you're having a conversation with a farmer. We know everything that they do would still tick the boxes of cruelty, but they will argue adamantly that they are not cruel. They do everything to a certain standard. Their animals mean the world to them. They will argue the element of cruelty all day long, even though it's fact. It's not even up for debate because they don't see cruelty in the same way we do. How do we bridge that gap when the general public have exactly the same view of that word as what the farmer does?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to normalize that the same things that the farmer does to the animals in his or her farm are the same things that we would frown upon if the victims were dogs, cats, or humans.
Well, I mean, you're really saying it's akin to Watson's idea of ripening up, aren't you? So you got to ripen people up to understand what the vegan view of the word means rather than what the cultural view of the word. But I mean, Cliff, you just said that you have a sign which mentions abuse. And then the first question you ask them is something that they're is in that paradigm when you talk about kicking dogs.
Yes. No, well, the first question I asked them to tell me what their general opinion of animals is. And most people will say, I love animals or I like them or whatever. And then I say, well, what do you think of people who abuse animals? And they will all say something akin to, I would hang them or stab them or kick them, or they should be thrown in prison or something like that. My next question is, what do you qualify as abuse? And I get them to agree that it's causing unnecessary harm to an animal. And then I say, well, what about the animals we take into slaughterhouses? And you can literally see, I don't know if you guys watch any of my videos, but with most people, you can literally see people's minds going, oh, because they're now caught in that trap that I've set for them. And I mean, it sounds a terrible way to say it, but I'm setting a trap for them to realize, and then I explain to them, well, if you think kicking a puppy's bad, or you think fox hunting's bad, or you think bullfighting's bad, well, then why is it okay to stab an animal in the throat or throw them in a gas chamber or enslave them or forcibly impregnate them, and all these things that they think is normal behavior? I've now reprogrammed them to agree that that is abuse, and it works. And also abuse is, I mean, to clarify, I am as far away from welfareism as you could ever be. Like, I'm at the anti-use abolitionist end of the spectrum. But I'm trying to open a conversation with people in a way that they understand where I'm coming from. And it works. I know that it works, 100% works. That's why I do it. I wouldn't waste my time standing on the street talking to people. If I stood with a sign in the street that said, tell me your views on animal use, I don't think many people would come and talk to me, because the word abuse is an emotive word, you know. So I'm wanting them to realize that they are funding and supporting animal abuse.
What about if it wasn't use and instead was exploitation?
I don't know. I like the word abuse because it is emotive, and people want to tell me they're against animal abuse, and then I'm basically telling them, well, no, you're not. You're actually on the side of animal abuse if you're not vegan.
Exploitation is not as strong, is it? I don't think that would attract people in the same way as abuse.
No, but I suppose that they can relate more than use. Use doesn't even sound negative to a lot of people, does it? It doesn't. It sounds like a productive word, use. That's something they do every day. So whereas exploitation hasn't really got a positive connotation.
Exploitation is stronger than use, but I think abuse is stronger than exploitation. You see, one of the dictionary definitions of abuse is immoral use. And so therefore, in terms of how animals are used, all use of other animals by humans is abuse, because all of it is immoral use. And I tend to think it's getting, yes, people have a misunderstanding of that they equate abuse with some kind of horrific cruelty, don't they? But like, I think, should we be kind of reclaiming the word abuse for what it kind of really means, if it means immoral use? And, we should be explaining to people that that's what it means. And so therefore, if they're not vegan, then they're not opposed to abuse, or if they're not vegan and they're opposed to abuse, then they're being inconsistent.
Well, okay. Since you've kind of stressed those words, Colleen said about 5 minutes ago, what does oppose mean? And then said that the crux is how one interprets oppose.
They disagree, I'd say. That's one interpretation. Say, I disagree with it. So most humans are disagreeing with something that they do themselves, or that they're part of themselves.
Yeah, but the thing, if you then say the next question, okay, so you disagree with it, does that mean you need to go vegan? They'll say no to that, wouldn't they?
Yes, but then they're being hypocritical, aren't they? Because they're disagreeing with something while being part of it.
Well, I would say they're reflecting the culture that they're in. And so what we're trying to do is shift the cultural understanding of the word. But the problem that I would have is that if you dive into the welfare paradigm in terms of your talking, then it seems to me that's not where you want to be. You want to talk about abolition, and so therefore the best words to use are use.
But that's
because it's honest then from our point of view, and it kind of brackets off the welfare conversation. I mean, you must have had pushback, Cliff, where people have said Well, yeah, but kicking a dog is one thing, but when you're talking about flesh consumption, that's all regulated. What about the ISPCA, or what's the RSPCA where you are, right? And so, and so all that, and so what they will have done is bring that cultural understanding of that word to challenge this kind of trap that you've moved them into.
It doesn't happen a lot, but people do challenge it for sure. But that's where I'm going to use the word skill loosely. I'm just having conversations with people and trying to give them a different perspective, the perspective of the victim. People think that it's necessary. That's one of the key words that I focus on a lot. So people think, oh yeah, but we need food. We have to kill animals to survive. We need it for protein, we need it for calcium. So people have all these beliefs that they've been taught since childhood. But when I explain to them that it's not necessary, I'll actually say to them, so there's no necessity. I've explained to you now, there is no necessity. So therefore, what would be the justification? And they don't have one. Nobody has ever come up with a suitable justification.
So if you frame that there's no necessity to use them, then we're having the conversation that we want to have with them.
Yeah. And see, I think there's confusion slightly, Roger, because I am against animal use, full stop. Like I said to you, I'm an abolitionist. When I'm having a conversation, so when some vegans talk about abuse, and I think you have a survey thing that you wanted to share. Some people who are vegan think that we are against animal abuse. And we're trying to lessen suffering and all this nonsense, which is not what veganism is about. That's not where I'm at. I'm trying to meet people where they're at. I can't meet somebody in the street who's at, I'm trying to explain this. So if somebody's at level 3 with what they think about animals and how we use them and how they justify it, I can't start talking to those people at level 9 or 10 because it's just going to go straight over the head. So I have to try and meet those people at 4 or 5 and drag them towards us, towards our position. Does that make any sense? Rather than...
Yeah, it does. And from what you're saying as well, that once you kind of establish that connection, like we can have a conversation on the same wavelength, I'm assuming that escalates into an abolitionist position.
Oh yeah, like people will ask me, and
I can understand that if it's used for that emotive kind of, I've got you right now, you'll speak to me, and let's progress a little bit. I think that works just fine. I think the issue that we've got, I suppose, like referring to that poll, is that people don't usually get the second part of that. They just get it's abuse or it's cruelty, and they look for ways to avoid that cruelty then going forward. That's what it's how things like free range and cage free and stuff like that. That's why they're so popular, because people are looking to feel more comfortable. They know cruelty exists now, so they want to try and move away from that. So I think that's a big part of the problem, that most people aren't getting that second part where that information's backed up and you're kind of escalated to the next level.
Could I ask you all a question? I'm not the host, but I would like to hear all your answers on this. Do you think that the corporate, the AJPs and certain other corporate organizations, because of the narrative they push, which to me is a welfarist narrative, do you think that has caused massive confusion in the movement?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
absolutely.
Those polls show that. I mean, I can bring those polls up probably if I skip through, because I produced a PowerPoint for this. So let's put it down that way, and then I'll see if I can find out. So, bear with me, folks. So this is your poll, first of all, Andy, which was done on TikTok.
TikTok one, yeah.
Yeah. And so you wanted to ask non-vegans. Now, because it's on TikTok, there's going to be a lot of troll comments here, I think. And so I think that your statement about if you're walking down the street with a clipboard, you're not going to get that many no's. It's just people, messing around on TikTok. Then this is the one. Now, Tim Barford of VegFest UK gave me permission to use this. This is just a poll that has come out of the last VegFest, which was held last weekend. So, just a few days ago. And so all the people asked this question were vegans or described vegans, and the top one was essentially what Earthling Ed says, a way of reducing suffering. So that of the 17 people that responded so far, I think the poll is still open. So he just allowed me to have the results for as they stand right now. So 8 out of 17, a way of life that reduces suffering to animals. Of 4 of the 17, a lifestyle choice that avoids cruelty to animals. And then, if you like, from our point of view, the correct answer, and in fact, the reason that's got a dot in it, the thing is blue there, is I think this is Benny Malone's answer, so it was right, as it were. A position that seeks the end to end the use of all animals, and then you got one person saying it's a diet, and then nobody said it was a lifestyle, which is quite interesting because a lot of people claim, oh, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. So I'm surprised that didn't get any, but then it could do. But it's a bit disappointing if vegans said this, right?
How many vegans do you think are prepared to stand up and say, what one is it? The end of use, so the second one, that's the one it should be. How many vegans who even claim to be abolitionists are strong enough to actually stand over that? Like, I'll give you an example. I was driving yesterday through a town. It was quite warm here yesterday, and there was a woman standing collecting for guide dogs for the blind. And I was actually angry. Not angry, I'm not an angry person, but the doggy standing there being made to stand all day with her collecting money and being her slave. Like, so I am prepared to stand up and say that dog should not be used as a slave in that way. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. How many other vegans would be prepared to articulate that position to their friends and family and people around?
Well, there are people who call themselves vegans who ride horses, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, quite a lot of people who call themselves vegans ride horses.
Yeah. Cliff, in fact, so to take like your outreach, for example, do you not feel that like it's very frustrating doing what you're doing when you've got someone, say, like Ed, who can literally make a 2-minute video that'll reach millions of people that completely undoes all that work that you're talking about, where he'll literally say veganism is about reducing suffering, and like the people that are listening to that's their viewpoint of it.
Yeah. Are you saying that Ed's like,
well,
is that utility he's talking about, or?
Yeah, so this is the one. I'll see if I can make this a little bit bigger, because David, you sent this slide in for us to have a look at, right?
Yeah.
So I suppose I could put it this way, and that means that and you were objecting to the idea about reducing harm, reducing suffering, which is Earthling Ed's main claims making. He was on the TV recently, Andy, and he said those words, didn't he? I mean, in terms of
if you want to search for it, it's Ed versus journalist about tomatoes screaming, I think is the headline of the video. But go and watch it, and I mean, he gets a decent length of time to talk about his position, and those are the words that he chooses.
So I think the real problem is when you think about the size of Earthling Ed's platform compared with ours, right? So there's a mismatch there. So if you've got one of the largest influencers not telling people the accurate definition of veganism, and then until he stopped being plant-based, so did Cosmic Skeptic. So there you've got two of the biggest voices in the movement in recent years, not actually telling people what veganism is, and not telling vegans what veganism is. So in that sense, we're fighting on all levels, because our movement doesn't tell people what veganism is, and so it's not a surprise to me is when we get terrible press in the mass media, because the journalists also don't know what veganism is, because we tell them it's about cruelty. Right. And and so is there anything you want to add to this?
Could I ask David a question here? David, could you, I think you guys will probably know this, but I know David does, so I'm just asking him. Could you articulate to people the difference between utilitarianism and deontology from a vegan perspective?
Okay, well, utilitarians don't oppose necessarily animal use. they oppose animal use if it causes harm, if it causes suffering. And vegans oppose all animal use, regardless of whether that use causes direct harm to animals. So vegans are the deontological part of the movement, of the animal welfareist movement, or I don't want to call it welfareist movement, but the animal cause, I would say.
So it'd be fair to say that a deontologist focuses on the use of an animal at base level, and a utilitarian focuses on the outcome. Am I?
Yeah,
right
the idea is that vegans oppose all animal use so that the animals are finally liberated from humans.
So if you identified as a vegan and you're a utilitarian, and somebody said to you, right, okay, we can take 10 pigs, for example, and we can experiment on them, and we're going to come up with a cure for an illness that will save 10 million human beings, a utilitarian would take that option.
Yes.
Whereas a deontologist would say no, because it's wrong to violate the rights of one, no matter who benefits from that.
Exactly. Utilitarians make the calculation of whether it would cause less suffering if we violate the rights of other animals.
In the past, I've heard rights-based people answer that question, the vivisection one, by saying if you could guarantee, because they usually talk about a cure for cancer, right? We can use 5 rats and get a cure for cancer. Would you accept it? We'd say no, but then the deontologists in the audience would say, well, if it was guaranteed, I'll volunteer. That's how they would answer, because it's not the other animal's fault that humans get cancer. And the fact is, you've slimmed it down to only exploiting and using 5 is irrelevant from an animal rights and vegan point of view.
I wouldn't volunteer for a specific vegan reason, because this is going to sound really crazy. Say the person I save is not vegan, and I thought you might say that, and they continue to eat animal products for the rest of their life. Well, then I have indirectly caused the suffering of hundreds of animals.
What if the person you saved was you before you became vegan?
Well,
or someone that you see, I think that's the kind of
that's a Doctor Who question.
Yeah, but you can't.
But it's like kind of that almost all of us who are now vegan at one time weren't vegan.
That's a funny question when it's myself, but I think it's very unfair to look at those things from a what if it was your partner or what if it was your child's point of view, because it puts a huge bias on it. I'm going to say the terms my doggy, my companion doggy, I would save him over almost every human being on earth. So it's not fair to put a bias of association on that question. I don't know if you guys would agree with that or not. I'd save my doggy almost before anybody.
Yeah.
Because
I think that
I know him personally. But no, I would want agreement from the human beings first that they were going to go vegan and not cause any animal suffering before I'm going to. That sounds terribly harsh, guys.
Just a worldwide poll you'd want.
Yeah.
But the utilitarian thing would apply to humans as well. If there was an experiment on one human and that saved 100 humans, then that would be obviously acceptable to utilitarians as well, wouldn't it? It's not just other animals, surely.
Yes. Yeah. But I think that what we need to understand is that every cause needs a definite principle, like a categorical principle. And if a cause doesn't have that categorical principle, then it's not a cause anymore.
No, I think that's a key point. I think going back to what Cliff said earlier about doing the outreach and backing it up with the stuff, I think that's because the cause is what you're doing this for. There's no careeristic element. It's not like, I better not say that because I might not get this donor next week. It's the cause. And I think that's the key difference between a lot of these big NGOs and stuff. Obviously, it's not the cause, is it? It's about making sure they get donorship. It's about making sure they get media coverage. It's about making sure they get the attention that they want. So they constantly dilute the message.
Well, Leslie Cross called veganism a principle. And it's, I mean, he kind of really meant it, I believe. And it'd be interesting what David thinks of this, is that it's a principle. You could see it as a searchlight, and you can then point it at an issue, and then which would illuminate the vegan argument about that particular thing. And so that's even now in the 1979 to 1988 definition, which is the one that everybody knows about practical and possible and stuff, because it's saying, in dietary terms, but it didn't mean that, and so that phrase has caused a lot of trouble because people don't understand what's being said. It just means, well, we're now going to talk about the vegan principle in terms of diet. It doesn't mean that vegan principle can't be turned elsewhere, as Cross would. You said, well, now vivisection. What about hunting? All that. And so do you like my searchlight idea there, David?
Well, I think that we have to be clear. Yeah, but we have to be clear about what the principle was. The principle was that humans have no right to use other animals, to exploit other animals for their own benefit.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, this is where we might not agree, in the sense that I think that's what I would call the focus of veganism, but not necessarily the scope. But in terms of, if you're limited to the focus, yeah, I agree with that. So that's the focus statement, and then there's these issues that you kind of focus on individually if you want, but you can make an abolitionist statement about not using other animals at all. So I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Veganism needs a strong, uncompromising, and clear philosophical message and movement. Well, this is one of the problems, is the fact that we don't, in terms of the movement, which is called animal rights, which isn't really an animal rights movement, and in terms of veganism, neither of these apply, because there's all kinds of. I mean, you were on the Reasonable Vegan podcast, David, and he was saying that every vegan can just have their own definition. Right? Yeah, and
I disagree. Yeah, I disagree totally.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this has caused no end of trouble in the modern movement, in the sense that we've got a new generation coming in and deciding what veganism is. Mm-hmm. Rather than going to what veganism was supposed to be. I mean, Ronnie, you've said that is the fact that if you come into the movement, you've got almost like an obligation to find out what are the principles of the movement that you've just joined, right?
Well, yeah, well, absolutely, yes. I think there's been this kind of encouragement towards people thinking that veganism is just a diet, because that certainly suits the interests of big corporations, because they can make just as much profit out of plant-based food as they can out of animal products. So it's in their interest to kind of narrow it down to that, to just to that, I think. And I think that's kind of there's a lot of focus on all these products suitable for vegans in the supermarkets now, and isn't that wonderful? And if you look on any almost all vegan groups, that's the focus is just on the food. But I think that's been encouraged.
So are you saying that you think that against the claims making of, say, the Vegan Society, the corporations have corrupted the meaning for their own ends? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I think whether that's kind of they sat down and had a meeting and thought, right, we're going to deliberately corrupt this. I doubt if that happened, but I think it's just kind of part of their general operation that if the focus is on the food, then that's something that's marketable, isn't it? And something that it doesn't matter to them, whether they're selling food products suitable for vegans or not suitable for vegans, as long as they make a profit, and that's their kind of, obviously that's their aim. So I think that's sort of had an influence. That's kind of encouraged new vegans to think of veganism just as a diet.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Before
you've also got veganuary. Yeah, sorry, you was just going to say you've also got veganuary, which literally only focuses on food. That's pretty much how a lot of people get brought into this.
They claim that's not true, Andy, wouldn't they?
Well, why do they block anyone who asks them to talk about veganism then as a philosophy?
No, because it's you asking.
Well, no, I mean, there's countless examples of people that were removed from their page asking why they don't talk about the philosophy. So you think it doesn't help the situation, does it? If you've been brought into this, yeah, okay, obviously you're going to get the food knowledge from the supermarkets and stuff, but there should be something backing it up. Veganuary as an organisation should be providing the information, and they don't.
Yeah, David, you were going to say something, yeah?
Yeah, that the first change that they made in the vegan society to the definition was to downgrade the definition from a principle to
practice,
to a lifestyle.
Yeah,
a way of life. Way of life was the term that they used. So to go from a principle to a way of life is to do exactly the opposite of what Leslie Cross said that we shouldn't do. We shouldn't think of veganism as a set of practices, but as a principle from which this set of practices stem or result.
This comment from Colleen is interesting because I think we'll probably need to address that at some point. But maybe we should maybe suspend that and go to the first of the slides, which you suggested, Cliff. So this is this one here. Now that's not very big, so let's see if we can. So this is where you're going through the RSPCA, yeah.
Yeah.
How do we end up with a situation where the RSPCA don't prevent cruelty to animals, that they actively promote it? You see, they would disagree with that.
I don't care.
and then you mentioned the assured label, in the kind of red tracks and all that. But
there's an RSPCA assured label here.
Yeah, but that is their attempt to try to reduce or eliminate the cruelty and abuse.
Yeah, but all those things I've listed there, that they actively endorse our cruelty and abuse, every single one of them. Tell me which one's not.
No, they absolutely all are. It's just the fact that these things are the regulated part of use. So all of those are not seen by the RSPCA as cruelty. They stop excess cruelty after all those things have been done.
Yeah, but hang on a second. Isn't the word contentious word here is endorse, as though they want this?
Yeah, well, they do. They actually endorse the products. They have a label. There's an RSPCA approved label product. So they, like, I think I said.
But their overall aim is to reduce, and if they could, end the cruelty and the abuse, right? And so that is why they have all these guidelines for things like slaughterhouses and everything, in order to do exactly that. But because they're not opposed to use, they've got this weird situation where they're trying to regulate what, I always used to say you can't regulate atrocities, but that is their job. That is what they're set up to do, to regulate animal use. And what they try and do then is try and take as much cruelty and abuse out of it without taking away the use.
The RSPCA, well, I have tried, as I'm sure you guys have, to have a conversation with them in the past, and they will not have the conversation. Like, how can you sensibly, and I'm talking to the converted here, but I'm asking a serious question. How would they square the circle of we are against animal abuse, but we endorse throwing pigs in the gas chambers? What's the answer to that question?
I'm not sure. I know they've got their stamp of approval, but I don't think I think they would kind of quibble about the word endorse, because I think they would say, in terms of animal welfare science, we're just recommending what is seen at the moment as the best practice. So this is why things move from this way of stunning to that way of stunning and all that. And they do even object more to ritual methods of slaughter which don't involve stunning, because then they can't kind of intervene and try to put in a measure. Like, for example, they've got all kinds of regulations about stunning. In fact, I might have a slide here. Hang on a second. Yeah, so there's the ambitions. But then when it comes to stunning here, it is vital that they're treated properly and killed humanely. Now, you see, what they're not doing is what you're expecting them to do, but which is outside their remit, which is to say, nobody should kill anyone, and so therefore go vegan. The RSPCA are not set up to do that. They're set up to stop cruelty and abuse.
So one of the things they regulate here, Roger, is thumping of baby pigs. Does somebody live near an airport? Yeah. I can hear an airplane in the background or something. But anyway, so one of the things they regulate here is pig thumping for little sick pigs, where they pick them up with the back legs and smash them on the concrete floor. That is a completely RSPCA approved practice. That's just
it's called blunt force trauma, right?
Blunt force trauma, yeah, that's their phrasing. Yeah, so that's RSPCA approved. So how on earth can they again square the circle by smashing a little baby animal's head off a concrete wall or the concrete floor, and then they say, oh, but we're against abuse? What the hell? It makes no sense, none whatsoever.
No, it doesn't from our point of view, but from theirs, they're looking. So even though it sounds absolutely insane to us, that is part of the process. And it's kind of the same as if you had the conversation with them and say, how can you say that chucking day-old male chicks into a macerator? And they'll say, well, because that's the process. We've only got the permit to control this. So they stop those day-old chicks, say, being individually tortured. They'd be against that. They can't stop the systematic process because they haven't got any power to. One of the best ways of looking at the RSPCA's power that I quite often bring up, look at MBR acres. So we know that the RSPCA care about cruelty to dogs. We know they do. That's one of their main mantras. But when it comes to, say, MBR, they've legally got no power whatsoever to help the beagles, but they could intervene in the guard dogs that work outside. So it's not even necessarily their fault all the time. Sometimes it's just the framework that they work within is already decided that all of these things are necessary. They don't have any control over that. It's only the unnecessary things that they might be able to influence.
Yeah, I guess I used the word endorse there because say you're a good-hearted person, you're not vegan. There are lots of good-hearted people out there who are not vegan, and those are the people I'm trying to talk to in my street interviews. So say you're a good-hearted person who believes that you have to eat animals to survive and whatever, and you haven't had a conversation with a vegan like any of us, and you care about animals, well then you may think to yourself, I'm going to buy the RSPCA approved product because at least then I'm doing my part. So they are endorsing and encouraging people to buy those products.
Well,
that's an endorsement.
Well, they probably would want that,
well,
though, wouldn't they? They would, if there's a choice of a non-red tractor thing or one that they've endorsed, let's use that language, they would want them to go for that because there's less cruelty involved. That's their remit.
But there's not. You know, that pig farm, the pig farm that we did here, Roger, the one just outside Ballymena, the Meet the Victims one was red tractor approved. And the conditions in that place were, I couldn't even describe it. Shocking.
No. Yeah.
Plus,
Shocking wouldn't even cover it. That's the best we can do. That's red tractor approved. So those labels mean nothing. They're just those labels are for human beings to feel better about a bad choice.
Yeah, it makes it harder to persuade people to go vegan because they use the excuse, well, I can, I can avoid cruelty to animals by buying products that are RSPCA approved.
Yeah.
So it makes that they're actually making our job more difficult by doing this.
I agree, Ronnie, 100%.
And it becomes.
I mentioned this to you last night, Ronnie, that in Animal Liberation by Peter Singer, he said that when people go into a supermarket and they pick a bit of flesh off the shelf, they know there's no cruelty in what they've got in their hand. The reason that they know that is because the RSPCA exists and their job is to prevent cruelty to other animals. And so they then say to themselves, well, this is cruelty free because if they had any cruelty in this, the RSPCA it wouldn't be here. So it's got to be This is the kind of logic. But all of that is within the welfare paradigm. That non-cruel use is not only feasible but common. And so again, that's another reason why I would try to avoid the welfare paradigm when I'm talking to people and move them as quick as possible. Even if we started with that, I'd move them and bracket that off, hopefully, so you can then start talking about what you really want to talk about.
But I think that what we need to make people realize is that those are myths created by the RSPCA, that they are lying to the public.
Yeah, they are. But how they would defend that, going back to the red tractor example, is even though, so let's just say, for example, the red tractor farm you're talking about is 2 out of 10. They'd say the one that's not red tractor approved is 1 out of 10. So they'd still recommend using the other one. And you like, it's stupid. It really is from our point of view. But from the general public, that's.
But it's their job, though. It's their job to do that.
Yeah.
You know, this is why when Earthling Ed released the video talking about the slaughter of cows who were pregnant, if you find you've just slaughtered a female cow and they find there's a fetus inside, what do you do? So they've got guidelines about what you do, and that's where you use your blunt trauma and everything, because they're trying to regulate what might well happen in a slaughterhouse to the best of their ability, to the extent of issuing guidelines to say, okay, you've now got to, because a calf in that situation is in a weird situation because they're kind of not real, they don't really exist, because they haven't been ear tagged, they haven't been they're not in the system.
Yeah, up until 24 hours. I'm going to use the word rights loosely here. Up until they're 24 hours, a calf has absolutely no rights whatsoever. You can basically do whatever you want, which is why loads of farmers just dispose.
Well, I would say they got no rights after 24 hours.
No, they don't. But you understand what I'm saying. They have
nothing.
They have nothing at all. So that is why so many farmers can just shoot them in the head when they're born, or why I've actually seen farmers here set them on the ground and hit them over the head. People dispute this, but they absolutely do it. They hit them blunt force trauma on a newly born calf. It's absolutely terrible.
Well, your position is that even from Canada here, the RSPCA is to support the industry and the use of other animals. Now, are we all saying then that the RSPCA are totally disingenuous and they've got no interest in reducing all that work that they do and all those regulations is just a big con? It's nothing to do with actually doing what they say they're trying to do. Is that what we're all saying?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Do you all know who set up the RSPCA? I'm taking you do.
Sorry?
Do you all know who founded the RSPCA?
The woman. No,
not name-wise. I know it's a decent.
It was the SPCA at first, but it wasn't the RSPCA.
The guy who drove the abolitionist movement for slavery in the UK. I'm trying to think of his name desperately as we speak.
Yeah, Chesterfield.
I'll tell you now. You give me 1 second.
Yeah.
So I think the original intention was probably.
They also started the NSPCC, didn't they? And got involved with the anti-slavery movement. So Wilberforce, I think
William Wilberforce, yeah. I think they endorse it. I think they're a joke and a sham, and I agree with Ronnie that they are so problematic for us. And so I wish they would just piss off. Sorry, pardon my language, but I think they're not needed anymore. Go away. Let people who genuinely care about animals get on with it.
Do you think they do any good in terms of their inspectorate and they'll rescue a horse who is stuck in a bog, and they'll prosecute people who are actually beating the horse? They will prosecute the person kicking the dog. I mean, that's where it all started. I mean, they didn't particularly want to go into the animal agriculture area in the same ways. I mean, like Ronnie will know, there was a big row within the RSPCA about hunting because the RSPCA were full of hunters.
But they weren't against, if you go back to the 1970s, they were not opposed to hunting. And so the hunters used that to justify hunting. They said, well, hunting, there can't be anything wrong with hunting because the RSPCA isn't opposed to it. Well, farmers could use the same argument. There's nothing wrong with us, farming these animals because the RSPCA isn't opposed to it.
And that's same with circuses. Yeah. You stand out a circus and say animal rights, and they say we've just been inspected by the RSPCA, and they say it's grand, right?
Yeah.
But that's because they're a welfare group. It's nothing to do with animal rights.
Yeah, they're just doing what they're set up to do. But
and it's also not a vegan organization either.
No, they are against animal cruelty.
Yeah,
they're against animal cruelty that exceeds what they've been told or they've decided is necessary for the systematic ways that we already use animals. Yeah, so if you kick a dog in the street, they'll be all over that. But breeding dogs to sell, as long as you're confining to the rules of whatever the country is, like in the UK now, is it 1 litre per year? As long as you're doing that, the RSPCA have got no problem with use.
Would it be fair to say that people see abuse as it's only abuse if the animal doesn't die at the end of some process? If you die, then it's not abuse. Do people see it that way?
I think sometimes
people don't even die or be killed.
I think sometimes people don't even see abuse unless it's physical. Like I've had conversations where people have completely denied emotional abuse or say trauma or any of those things that animals could feel. It's like they're not bleeding, so they haven't been abused.
Yeah.
Sometimes it really is they have to see it.
Well, if it helps, and tell me if it won't. I mean, there's this book here by a mate of mine called wait a minute. Let me get this off. Okay. Right, this book here, Understanding Animal Abuse. It's by Clifford Flynn, who's is a great guy, and he sounds like he's completely out of Dallas, the TV show. Do you know Dallas, the TV show, David? Do you know what I mean? And there's also an article in this book, Mag. The reason I've got this one is that's the article that I wrote in there as well. But in both of these, he goes into the sociological and the criminological understanding of animal abuse and how it's understood by the culture. So if you want, I can go through a couple of definitions which speak to what we've said already. So he talks about Ascon, who is one of the main researchers, defined animal cruelty as socially unacceptable behavior that intentionally causes unnecessary pain, suffering, or distress to or death to an animal. Under this definition, neglect would be included, but only if it were intentional. So you can neglect another animal not legally, but you wouldn't be castigated if you didn't know what you were doing, as it were, and you didn't intend it. Yet this definition excludes the legal, socially accepted behaviors, which are often deemed necessary, that cause the most harm to other animals. For example, factory farming, hunting, or animal experimentation. So we've got this problem when you look at the sociological understanding of animal abuse. You find over and over again that you've got this distinction being made between the use which is deemed acceptable by society and the use that is not. So this is tied up with this overarching idea of unnecessary suffering, because the concept of unnecessary suffering implies that some suffering is necessary. What is that? That's the suffering that's needed to get the job done, like removing teeth and tails and that kind of debeaking is seen as necessary. So if the RSPCA take someone, say a pig farmer, to court and say, this guy's being very cruel to pigs, the first thing the judge asks is, what do farmers normally do to pigs? Right. And then tries to find out if this guy has done something above and beyond that. Because if it's what the other farmers do, then because they're seen as rational actors in terms of the use of their property, it would be, well, all the farmers do that, so it must be okay. That's deemed necessary suffering. Yeah. So let me just say another couple of things, and then I'll shut up. This is Flynn again. Criminologists have led the way in studying animal abuse sociologically, and in terms in reconceptualization into a less anthropocentric way. Agnew, Piers Byrne, mate of mine, Kazooks, who's still on Facebook, Byrne, has argued powerfully for what he calls a non-speciesist criminology, which recognizes animal abuse as a legitimate object of study in its own right, not just because it's related to interhuman conflict and violence. Agnew has proposed the only fully fledged theory of animal abuse, calling a social psychological theory. Agnew draws on social learning, in other words, socialization, strain theory, and control theories. Agnew proposes the adoption of a much broader definition of animal abuse, and this is a quote: any act that contributes to the pain or death of an animal or that otherwise threatens the welfare of an animal. So this is Flynn now commenting on that. This definition includes legal practices such as factory farming and animal experimentation, and some individuals may not consider abusive, but that account for the most harm inflicted upon animals. By including socially acceptable practices, abuse, quote, is not tied to the prevailing beliefs about animals, including beliefs about the acceptability or necessity of activities that are harmful to animals. And so this is the problem. When you've got this word abuse, it's understood culturally to have this dividing line between what is socially acceptable. Well, we need our meat. And so, therefore you go, okay, well, in that case, the best thing we can do then is to minimize it, and if possible, eliminate the cruelty from that system. And then if it's the socially unacceptable stuff, that's, as Andy said, then the RSPCA will jump all over that because everybody's against it already, right? And so this is one of the problems, Now, it seems to me that when you talk about use, you bracket that entire argument away and you talk about what we want to talk about.
The other part of it is I'm not 100% sure where they stand too when it comes to, obviously the RSPCA are a charity, so they can only use the current legislation or framework that exists to prosecute anyone. So for example, when it comes to livestock, for example, if these things are already in place, they can't use the legislation that says it's okay to do this, 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 and this to prosecute someone for doing this, 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 and this, because it's already legislated for. So that it has to breach one of those things before they've even got a case anyway. Because if it says that this is part of this process, and all those boxes are ticked, even though we know they're all horrendous, the RSPCA can't intervene, say, by debeaking, because that's probably already one of the things that's legislated for. So it's protected, if anything.
Yeah, but why do they have to endorse things?
They don't.
They could be the RSPCA, Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Companion Animals.
I actually think on that note, if they completely moved away from that sort of thing and they were just responsible, say, for domesticated and pets and wildlife, that it would reduce their job to a manageable level as well.
And it would help our movement, like to Ronnie's point.
Yeah, I agree with that too, because it would go back to really how they started, really. I mean, I don't really know why they got involved with animal agriculture, for example, and so-called livestock farming and all those kind of things. I don't even know, where it comes in, because they're so limited, as Andy just said, in what they can do. That their kind of hands are tied. So I'm not sure that I really buy the kind of conspiratorial thing that they're in league with the animal using industry. I'm not quite sure that is true. I just think that they almost can't do any other.
Well, if you try to have a conversation with them, Roger, online, they will not say this. I seriously doubt that people even that work for them are vegan, but they will never say, yeah, look, fair enough, I am actually against the gassing of pigs and macerating of chicks and keeping animals slaves. We're against all of this, but we can't do anything about it. And I would go, well, that's fair enough. That's a fair position, but they don't do that. When you try to ask them about it, they try to defend it. They try to defend their endorsement of these things. So that's they're either being dishonest or
Do you think it's
that's
possible?
The rational position.
Do you think it's possible that's a case by case? I mean, I used to know the people who used to run the RSPCA shelter in not Stockport, it was Southport, Merseyside, and they were vegans, and they were in conflict with their head office all the time because of that. So I think it might be a case by case. I would have thought that the situation with the RSPCA might be a little bit better now, in the sense that probably more vegans and even vegetarians, if that means anything, involved with the RSPCA now than before.
I don't think a vegan would work for the RSPCA.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I'm not sure whether it would be the opposite now, where they've got such a bad opinion that you'd be like, well, how could I associate with this organisation for all the reasons we've just mentioned? Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, I think
there's a big difference between the central RSPCA and the local branches. Yeah. In fact, they're almost a different organisation, because the local branches don't receive, from what I, as far as I'm aware, the local branches don't receive any financial help from the central RSPCA, and they have to do their own fundraising.
Sounds like AV to me.
Yeah, so they're almost like two separate, and so the local branches vary tremendously. I mean, there's one local branch down the road from here where, at their fundraising functions, they're almost entirely vegan, the food that's served, and it's certainly they certainly don't serve meat or fish, and that's because a majority of people on their committee are either vegan or vegetarian. Whereas our very nearest RSPCA, they have fish suppers as fundraising events, so you can go along and have fish and chips, and give some money to the local RSPCA.
But Cliff and David, would you both? I suspect that you would both say that in both of those cases, no vegan should be working for them or be associated with them.
Yeah.
No, definitely not.
Exactly.
So how do you think they justify it, Ronnie?
Well, I think the local branch here that serves as the fish and chip suppers.
No, the other ones, the ones who go for the vegan friendly stuff.
You mean how do they justify being part of the RSPCA?
Yeah.
Well, because their branch is really entirely to do with animal rescue. They've got an animal shelter there that takes in dogs, cats, and other animals, and that's that's kind of really what they do. I mean, the local branches aren't involved in prosecuting people or anything like that. That's done by the inspectors that come under the kind of sort of national umbrella, really. And so, because these are people that are into animal rescue and they're kind of also vegan, that they're trying to get that local branch to.
So they're doing the best they can in the system that they've got. Well, I would say that explains the RSPCA as well.
No, but I don't think it's ethical to work or support organizations that put a seal of approval in animal products that in any animal products. I don't think it's ethical. That they know that these animal exploiters are going to make more of a profit if they have the seal of approval. So I don't think it's ethical to support them.
Yeah, even if you're talking about, say, the volunteers that don't get paid a wage, go and volunteer at a sanctuary. At least you're not contributing to anything bad. I mean, it's a difficult position. I suppose some of the more sort of local grassroots organisations of the RSPCA might have that ethos, but you've still got to feel that confliction, surely, and you've still got to be constantly battling everyone above you.
It's like volunteering for sanctuaries that buy animals.
Yeah. I suppose it's worse even than that.
I wouldn't do it.
I had a discussion with a good friend of mine who's involved with Animal Rising, and he was one of the guys that liberated the puppies and the Grand National and all that stuff. And when he first went vegan, he got a job with the RSPCA, and then he left it very quickly because he said he just got so frustrated he was there to help animals, and then he's having discussions with people that love cats and dogs, and then they're eating meat and dairy products and all sorts of stuff. So he left very quickly.
I'll tell you what I think is going on it's a lot of vegans will say, and I imagine all 5 of us have had experience with this. A lot of vegans will say, I don't think the world will go vegan. And so therefore, I'm just going to be very practical about it and do the best I can. And I think that explains that group of people that Ronnie was talking about.
I think the world will go vegan, by the way. I have to believe that, otherwise I wouldn't do what I do. I genuinely believe it will. Maybe not in my lifetime, but
I've met quite a few vegans who have said, I don't think the world will ever go vegan.
It's very defeatist.
And they tend to be getting involved with single issues, welfare, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're just trying to save a few, aren't they? You know,
well, they're trying to do the best they can. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Save who you can. You know,
it's rescuism.
Yeah, it's rescuism, as I call it. But that it doesn't just apply to actual, you know, rescue in terms of, you know, sanctuaries and stuff like that. I mean, rescuism. I mean, I'd say the Hunt Saboteurs is a rescuist organisation because they're trying to save individual animals without reference to the reason why those animals, the fundamental reason why those animals are being oppressed in the first place. So they're rescuist, and so Sea Shepherd, for instance. But I'm coming back to the RSPCA. I think one question is, what do we do about it? When way back in the 1970s, when the RSPCA was riddled with hunters and was not opposed to hunting, there was a concerted effort made. There was an organisation created called the RSPCA Reform Group, and the idea of that was to get you know, kind of animal rights people, vegans, kind of elected to the RSPCA's ruling council, so that the policy could be changed, or fundamentally anti-hunt people, I suppose, more than anything else, elected to their, you know, to their ruling council, so that the policy could be changed, and that succeeded. You know, like everyone joined the RSPCA, and we all went along to their AGMs, and there was sometimes there was fighting there with the pro-hunt people and stuff like that. And in the end, it succeeded, and the RSPCA's policy was became opposed to hunting. And in fact, I think they also had a policy. I'm not sure it's still in place, but it certainly was at the time, that anyone who was involved in hunting was not allowed to become an RSPCA member if they knew about it. Now, we could make an effort to do the same today and get a load of vegans elected to the RSPCA committee and make the RSPCA a pro-vegan organisation. It's a question of whether it's worth the time and effort and money involved in doing that.
It can't be, I don't think.
I think I'd be looking much higher than that. I think the ultimate answer to the entire problem, how we go about this, I don't know, but the ultimate answer to the whole problem is personhood for animals legally, so that they are treated, they're not seen as property. They have to be legal persons. So
well, there is some
that's what we should be. That's what we should be going for, rather than, you know, dragging the conversation into the weeds about the RSPCA. And
yeah, there are some moves, aren't there, in the sense that, you know, many jurisdictions and nations and bodies are all coming around to the idea of declaring other animals as sentient beings. Now, again, from a vegan point of view, that seems such a low bar. Thinking, what, you know, the 21st century, and we're still talking about whether they're sentient beings, right? But that is seen to be the only problem with it is that the welfarists get hold of this idea, and they go, oh, well, if they're sentient beings and we now recognize them as sentient beings, that means that we've got to be very careful about their welfare. What they don't do is what they should do, and say, well, they're sentient beings, so therefore they're rights bearers, which means that therefore they cannot be used. They don't make that jump, and they don't jump out of the welfare paradigm as they should do, no matter what they get declared as, the other animals, because they're just exploitable beings for them.
Yeah, but if they're legal persons, if they get upgraded to legal persons and get pushed through that hole and onto the side that we're on, I mean, I think in America and stuff, like rivers and mountains and stuff and some corporations are recognized under the law as legal persons. So
yeah, corporations are described as legal persons. That's right.
Yeah. To be fair, if you could get something like that passed, you'd only really need a couple of big, high-profile court cases. Could you imagine if you got like the cows versus the RSPCA, for example, one court case done?
Yeah,
that's the end of them.
There's an organization in America trying to do that with. I think they're focusing on apes. So they've tried to get multiple cases into court. They're basically just looking for the right judge. And
it's Stephen Wise.
It's something to do with association. So if humans have these intrinsic values and they can prove and show that these apes have the same values and feelings and all the rest, well then it's something to do with association. Well then they're trying to drag apes through the hole, right? Okay, so you're not personhood, and then that would open the floodgates for other animals. So that is an ongoing thing in America. But
it's led by somebody called Stephen Wise, and his first book was called Rattling the Cage, which was quite a good book. It explained about how common law works and this kind of stuff, and they're looking for a perfect kind of case in order to kind of punch through the kind of barrier. And once there's a little hole in it, they can make it bigger and bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. Now, another lawyer, Francione, would say they're wasting their time because you've got to change the culture much more significantly before that's going to work. Mm-hmm. And I think most of us would probably agree with that.
It comes down to outreach, doesn't it? Because we're only going to get that situation if we create a lot more vegans, because then we've got, as I'm always saying, if you create more vegans, you get more vegan politicians and more vegans to vote for them. And so you've got the right people there in Parliament to pass the necessary laws that would give other animals personhood.
But we're miles off that as well, because we've got to start with the education and making it as widespread as possible, right?
Yeah.
So So in a sense, Cliff, that idea that you're articulating is kind of, it's not. We're not ready for that yet. That's a long way away.
But that's the ultimate goal. What I'm saying is, well, I don't know what I'm saying, but we shouldn't be focusing on the RSPCA and trying to change them and make small changes to them to upgrade slightly.
No, I think the solution for the RSPCA is to slim down their remit.
Yeah,
and that would, but then you see they would say what, and they don't get the red tractor protection, because although you'd laugh at that, Andy was saying, well, yeah, but the red tractor scores 2 or 3, whereas everybody else is 0 or 1, right? And so they would see that as something to do with reducing cruelty and abuse.
Well, I've been in red tractor approved places, many of them here, and they score -10. All of them, they're all shitholes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It means nothing. And another thing, just I wanted to raise with you. So, the lady we were talking about initially, what's her name again? Sorry,
Angela Davis.
Yeah, she in that post said industrialized, and in the quotes you were reading from your book, industrialized came up over and over again. I need to get rid of that because I've been in.
That's why I asked the first question, though, Cliff, because I was thinking, was she set up by Mercy for Animals to say all that? Because, was she not following a script, but I mean, because, for example, the industrialized bit, I mean, that is what Mercy for Animals would say, because they actually campaign for the cage-free stuff. Like I said, they got a $12.5 million budget for that the next couple of years. So that's their campaign. So they would have wanted her to say industrialize. And so I was wondering whether that they would also want her to have said that first sentence too, because
I don't know. Why would you say something? I would not let somebody talk me into saying something that I didn't want to say. I didn't feel myself. You see, the industrialized thing, we need people seriously to stop that, because I've been in, let's just say I've been in loads of farms. I've been in what would be considered factory farms and what would be considered small local Joe up the road with a small farm. And the conditions in the small local farms are and this might be a shocker for some people, and it might not be. The conditions in the small local farms are oftentimes much worse than the factory farms.
Yeah, you're not wrong there.
Yeah, so when people are campaigning to shut down factory farms, well, people don't want there's pig farms being built here, and people are campaigning against them, including vegans. Oh no, this is terrible, blah, blah, blah. Well, I've been in the small local pig farms, and it couldn't be any worse. So some of the modern factory farms
what national organization do you know that doesn't talk about factory farming?
None of them. They all do.
They all do, yeah.
Yeah. So why is that? I don't get it. Why? Again, it's a welfarist position. Of course, that's why they do it, but it's not even a welfarist position because, like I say, the small ones are often worse.
Well, they do it because it's a motive too. It automatically elicits a response from people to hear that first word, factory. If they just say farming, people don't automatically go where they want them to go. Factory farming, you're already there.
Yeah. Well, nobody can ever articulate to me what a factory farm actually is. Where's the arbitrary line between a factory farm and what's the difference between a farm with 5,000 pigs or a farm with 500 pigs? What the hell difference does it make?
None.
Well, you'll know, Andy, that the term came in. I mean, it's in Carrying My Table. It was actually adopted first by the farmers themselves.
Yeah.
They started calling them factories. In the same way as in Ireland, and I think it's the same in Northern Ireland. They call slaughterhouses factories, don't they?
Most people here would say abattoir. Believe it or not, it's still a thing here. Yeah.
Right. It's a lot of meat processing plants now instead of slaughterhouses. Processing plants, yeah.
Yeah, processing is a big thing. I actually heard a guy from a slaughterhouse articulating that. They say it on purpose.
Yeah. Well, it sounds much better than a slaughterhouse, doesn't it? A processing plant sounds like you could be putting labels on
and harvesting is another.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, we were invited to rescue 200 free-range chickens from a farm. It was their first year of operation. It was a shambles. They were saying, for some reason, I don't know why they don't go out into the field and everything. And they put this ramp made up of these sharp kind of plastic kind of squares and everything. And it must have hurt them to go down and up this thing. So most of them elected not to go out, and they couldn't understand that. But when we were doing this rescue, the kids of the farmer came, and then they started talking about, they're going to the factory, because we had to go in the morning and get the 200, and then 800 were going to the factory, and the kids knew that, right? What it basically was that the farm had a contract to give the 800 to the slaughterhouse, but they crammed 1,000 in there because it means more, and so then they thought, I know, we'll get a sanctuary to take the 200. So we were kind of suckered into it, right? It's kind of emotional blackmail kind of stuff. But the kids knew about them going to the factory. So one of our team said, that's the slaughterhouse. And the farmer went absolutely apeshit with one of our volunteers because the kids didn't know that's what it meant.
You shattered the illusion, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, but they were the kids of the farm.
Have any of you guys ever been inside a so-called free-range barn?
Chickens, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, just if anybody's listening that doesn't know, there's 4,000, maybe more birds crammed in there. It's one massive big cage with a dog flap at one end, which allows them to go outside. But I would say 99% of those birds don't even know the outside exists. They just don't know.
Because they raise up the side, and the ones in the middle, and even if they wanted to get out, they'd have to push their way out past everybody else, and then they'd have to negotiate getting back in again. It kind of almost becomes not worth it. They'd have to move away from their food sources and stuff, and then they're probably going to be in an inferior situation when they get back in. So why would they? Right, people, it's 1 hour and 24 in. So do we want to make a decision about what we're going to do, or what? I wanted to just to finish off all that stuff I was talking about before. is people will know, you probably can't see this very well, but this is Doris Lynn. Now, she's active on Facebook and Twitter, I think. So you may know Doris Lynn. The chances are that she'll be a friend of yours on one of these platforms. So this is interesting. She's written an article, Key Facts About Animal Abuse. Animal advocates consider factory farming practices like debeaking, the use of veal crates or tail docking to be animal abuse. But these practices are exempt from many state anti-cruelty statutes. They're allowed because they're considered to be part of standard husbandry practices. Many animal rights advocates oppose not only animal abuse and animal cruelty, but any use of animals by humans. This can include animals displayed for entertainment or used for recreation, in addition to those raised to be food. For many animal rights advocates, the issue is not about abuse or cruelty. In fact, I think I've highlighted this. For many animal rights, the issue is not about abuse or cruelty. It's about domination and oppression. Thought you'd like that, Ronnie. Mm-hmm. About using animals for any human need, no matter how well the animals are treated, no matter how big the cages are, and no matter how much anesthesia are given before painful procedures. But that, to me, speaks to this differentiation that we're talking about. If you focus on being opposed to using them, you can bypass all that other stuff. It seems to me.
By the way, I was laughing there when you said the word domination, and then said something about Ronnie. I was like, "Is Ronnie into domination or something?" But no, that's my
that wasn't the word.
I don't have the context of what that meant. I was going to say, for me, use, a basic principle is that use without consent for me is always abuse. And the same principle should apply to human beings in that context, should also apply to animals.
Well, it might sound semantics, but Andy, would you go for use is abusive? You see, the point is, when you talk about animal abuse in that, because you've got the sign on animal abuse, then you're in the welfare paradigm, and you acknowledge that by talking about kicking the dog first, and then you try to get them out of the welfare paradigm into something else. But you're acknowledging that is the welfare paradigm, right?
At the start of the conversation. I first of all, I will always clarify to them that I'm vegan and an animal rights activist. It's one of the first things I always say when I disclose why I'm actually there. I want them to know that I'm for animal rights. And when they ask me the question, they invariably will ask me the question, and I will always clarify, that I want animal rights. I want animals to not be seen as property. I want them to have personhood. I always tell them that. It may not be in every video. It's in a lot of my videos, because sometimes I cut sections out because people go off on tangents. But I make it very clear to them that's my position. But I think it is useful to use emotive language to draw people into a conversation. Otherwise, I can't even have a conversation.
But I think Andy's already accepted that. But then the question is moving them. I mean, we can maybe do a little poll after 90 minutes. Do we still think that this is an accurate statement?
But I think that we need to go further into what she said after that phrase
about the industrialization.
And capitalism and
that was it. That was the captions. Not she didn't actually say that. I don't think.
because to me, because I watched the whole clip, and her whole point was that you can be against capitalism and then it would help the animals, because to her it's a problem of capitalism and the industrialized production of meat, as she said. And that's my problem with it, because she's trying to strip people from their own individual responsibility, from their own accountability, and blame it all on the system. it's the system problem. The problem is the system, not individuals.
Well, we've talked about that in terms of animal rising, even yesterday, Ronnie. I mean, the beauty of a sociological approach is that you can slide from the macro, the system, to the micro, the individual, and you can go backwards and forwards. So in actual fact, the two things are interlinked, really. So, if you talk about just one in isolation, you're missing something.
Yeah, kind of, but we are like, every individual is responsible for their own actions. We cannot just blame it on the system.
That's what I'm saying. That's the bit that's missing. If you only talk about the system, which is exactly what your point is, Ronnie, about animal rising, right?
There is no system that's separate from individuals. That's my point. That it's not something that's just been imposed on us by somewhere else. The system is as it is because of the behaviour of human beings as individuals.
Yeah, the system is created by individuals, but there's no such thing as an isolated individual either, because they are also subject to the values and the norms of the system.
Right, but they're still, they're still morally responsible for their own actions within that process. And this is why we have to change people as individuals if we're going to change the system.
I see it both ways, guys. I obviously work with animal rising and have done with animal rebellion, and I can see that we need systematic change and we need individual change. We need people working from both ends. So if we have groups working for systematic,
we've said that. Yeah, that's what we just said.
To the woman saying about capitalism, yes, capitalism is hugely problematic. But I would ask her to go to farms and slaughterhouses in Cuba and see how the animals are treated there. If it's a capitalist problem, go somewhere that's communist and see how you get on. See if the animals.
Well, the first answer you get there is that Cuba is not a communist country.
Well, whereas
it'd be very difficult for it to be one, considering its geographical location and its smallness, and the fact it's surrounded by, Mexico and US and all the rest. So so that I mean that's another argument definitely for us some other time. Yeah. So what we can do, folks? Do we want to carry on, or should we come back again another time and then go into what we were going to talk about, which was another aspect of Angela Davis's position, that she would probably call herself an intersectional activist, or at least pro-intersectionality would be part of her position. So do we come back?
Yeah. I need to go in, guys. So.
Yeah, I was going to say an hour and a half is plenty for everyone to listen to. I mean, I'm more than happy to do one of these next week as well.
What I do then, exclude myself because I've done too much talking already. Let's go around the panel. Do you want to make a final statement? And I'll do it. I'll do it on the screen I can see. So, David, do you want to say a last word?
Yeah. Well, I don't believe in systematic change without individual change. So, if we push for a systematic change, it's going just to be prohibition and welfarist stuff, like a single issue prohibition and welfarist campaigns. There's nothing we can do legally at this point, because there's not even a critical mass of vegans trying to educate the public. So I don't believe that this is the time to push for any legal changes.
There's very little critical about veganism at the moment. Thanks for that, David. Ronnie?
Well, I mean, I agree with David that obviously I've said already and say many times that to get system change, we need individual change. And so this is why vegan outreach is so vitally important, and we need it everywhere as often as possible. And I'd encourage all vegans listening to this to get involved in outreach. But on the topic, like kind of we started talking about, to do with opposition to the systematic abuse of other animals. It does really depend on what we consider to be abuse. And as I said, that there is a dictionary definition of abuse which says abuse is all immoral use, and the use of other animals in any circumstance by humans is actually immoral. Mm-hmm. So therefore, all use of other animals is abuse. Now, if the public don't understand that, then surely it's up to us to persuade the public to understand that.
Yeah, well, I can understand that in terms of Donald Watson's idea of ripening up. I can understand that. Cliff?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would agree with Ronnie wholeheartedly what he just said. That's why I go out on the streets and try and talk to people. I'm trying to reframe the whole conversation. So, yeah, anybody who's watching who is vegan, I would encourage you to do some activism in some way. Conversations, social media, I'm not too sure that it's really effective these days with the way social media works. So get involved somewhere, or just do something, do anything to try and help the animals in any way you can. And for you guys, like, I think we agree on most things. Roger and me have back and forth sometimes about different angles and things we disagree with, but I genuinely, people who are out there working for animals and speaking up for animals, I appreciate them so much. Like, if we don't go out there and speak for them, who the hell's going to do it? So I feel like it's a moral obligation that we all speak up for them. So I want to thank you guys for doing what you do. So.
Well, that's very kind, and thank you for your work. And
absolutely.
And last and least, no, sorry, I didn't mean that. And last but not least, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with there's no system change without individual change, and that's the sort of thing we should be working on. I mean, I want to also make it clear that despite obviously in agreement with the sentence and that sort of thing, I don't think any words are wrong as long as they're backed up with the right approach and everything else afterwards. Words are only weak when they're not backed up. If you say let's reduce cruelty without saying anything else after that, then that's a really weak statement to make, and most people are going to try and find a solution to that without even looking at the fundamental wrong. So we can correct that very simply. It's the bit that comes afterwards that's really important, and that goes for ourselves too. I mean, when we're having these conversations and stuff, and people disagree with one another, there's no problem saying that. We're all on the same side at the end of the day. We all want the same things. So just because we're, if you've got one approach and that doesn't work, and we're all doing the same thing, we're all got the wrong approach. So the more sort of diverse we are with these things, and the more that say, well, have you tried this? Have you tried this? I mean, one thing that you could just try on outreach, for example, is make the letters AB in small case and USE in large case, and see if that makes any difference.
Or so different colours.
Yeah, or something along those lines, yeah, and see, I mean, it's the same word at the end of the day, but you could just put your hand over it or any of those things and just see if people make any difference because of it.
Could I just make a point on that, just when you say that? So do you know the chant that when you go to a march or whatever, there's no excuse for animal abuse? I keep trying to encourage people to, there's no excuse for animal use, should be the chant. And I've tried that. Yes, I've been to like Canada Goose protests, and I don't generally do single issue. It's not my thing.
There's no excuse for Canada Goose.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, that works.
Get that on a t-shirt and sell them. Yeah, so it should be, there's no excuse for animal use. That should be the chant. So anybody listening who goes to a march, it's use and not abuse.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jason Cliff, and he's got a big sweatshirt, and it goes, there's no excuse for animal abuse, and there's a big cross through the AB.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen him wearing it.
Yeah, that's effective. Yeah, that would work, definitely.
Yeah.
Right, well, it's funny, people, because we've actually got an whole new topic which we were going to move on to, but and Cliff said, well, we might run out of things to say. And
I don't think so.
Never. And like we're not even halfway through, so there you go on that one. So thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll probably be back with this same panel if we can get it organized, and we'll let you know. And thanks for tuning in. If you're watching this on the recording, thanks to you as well. So bye for now, everyone.
See you later.
Thank you.
Cheers.